Welcome to Pixarize's scene for vitamin B12, or Cobalamin, part of our series on the vitamins. This scene takes place in an ordinary home where our characters are, just living their ordinary lives. Author Wayne Dyer said to find joy and solace in the simple. So hopefully you find those things in this image of a person cleaning and her bratty kid. It's going to be a pretty quick one, so let's get right down to it. Alright, so the first thing you'll notice here is the big blue clock in the bottom right corner of the image. If you've been watching our other B vitamin videos, you're probably anticipating some sort of B-related symbol to get us started. Well, that's exactly what this is. This B-themed clock is pointing straight up to 12 o'clock, to help us remember that this scene is about vitamin B12. And notice the clock's distinctive color. You might be trying to decide if it's cerulean or indigo or azure or zephyr. But if you adjust your computer's display settings to true color, you'd instantly realize that it's cobalt. This cobalt clock will help us remember vitamin B12's other name, Cobalamin. Vitamin B12 o'clock and cobalamin. Moving on. Now, the other part of the picture you probably noticed immediately was the big parrot in the left corner. He's important too because this parrot represents parietal cells. If we recall our basic gastrointestinal physiology, we'll remember that parietal cells are the gastric epithelial cells that line the body and fundus of the stomach. Parietal parrot cells get a lot of attention for secreting hydrochloric acid and acidifying the stomach contents, but they have another major role. They secrete a glycoprotein called intrinsic factor that binds cobalamin from the diet. If we look at our parrot, we can see that he's regurgitating a cogwheel that's sticking right to our B12 clock. This is to symbolize intrinsic factor being secreted from the parietal cells and binding vitamin B12, which is required for vitamin B12 absorption in the small intestine. Poor little parrot. Someone give this bird a Tums. Next, take a look at the owner of our parrot, who was just doing a bit of spring cleaning with her vacuum when she bore witness to this unusual scene. In her panic, she accidentally pointed this vacuum tube at the clock and gear. The end of the tube, threatening to suck in our clock, is there to symbolize the terminal ileum, where intrinsic factor-bound vitamin B12 is absorbed. Since the end of the vacuum cleaner is the end of a long tube, just like the terminal ileum. It's good to contrast this with folate absorption, which occurs in the jejunum, since deficiencies in both of these vitamins can cause a megaloblastic anemia, which we cover in our scenes on B9 and B12 deficiency. Let's take a look behind our vacuum-wielding character to the table in the background. See that humongous meatloaf loaf? It's there to remind us that meats are the primary source of vitamin B12 in the diet. But you're probably wondering why it's covered in green critters. Well, it looks like it's been left out for a very long time, which makes sense since meatloaf is pretty gross and people don't always finish it. More importantly, these green germy creatures are colonizing our meatloaf to remind us that vitamin B12 is actually exclusively synthesized by gut bacteria. Certain animals, like cows and pigs, can mobilize and absorb the B12 produced by their own gut bacteria, but human beings can't do this. Therefore, we rely on eating the meat and B12 of other animals. Next, turn your attention to the light on the table. There are two important reactions for which vitamin B12 acts as a cofactor that you'll have to be familiar with for your exams. The first is methionine synthase. Notice how our lamp looks a lot like an eye, a metal eye. Metal eye for methionine. Methionine synthase catalyzes the reaction that regenerates methionine from homocysteine. Specifically, a methyl group is transferred from methyl tetrahydrofluorate to vitamin B12 bound to methionine synthase, before being transferred to homocysteine to form methionine. Finally, if we look to the top left corner of the image, we can see that there is a very angry young boy doing a very angry young boy thing, breaking stuff. Specifically, he's breaking his own Millennium Falcon toy with a croquet club. Who knows why he has this much angst? Maybe it's hormones, or maybe it's because his mom made him gross meatloaf again. Either way, he's an ingrate. This angry kid is going to help us remember another enzyme that requires vitamin B12 as a cofactor, methylmalonyl-CoA mutase. The Millennium Falcon will remind us of methylmalonyl, and the croquet club should help us recall CoA. Methylmalonyl-CoA mutase converts methylmalonyl-CoA to succinyl-CoA, which can then be fed into the citric acid cycle or into the heme biosynthesis pathway. We'll take a closer look at the latter reaction when we discuss vitamin B12 deficiency. And that's all we've got for vitamin B12 biochemistry. It went by quickly, so let's do a recap. Vitamin B12 is also known as cobalamin, and we've represented it with our cobalt-colored B12 o'clock clock. Parietal cells, our parrot, secrete intrinsic factor that binds vitamin B12 and is absorbed in the terminal ileum, represented by the end of our mom's vacuum cleaner. B12 is absorbed from meats like our meatloaf and is synthesized by bacteria like the bugs covering the old meatloaf. Finally, the metal eye light and the croquet-smashed Millennium Falcon will help remind us that B12 is a required cofactor for both methionine synthase and methylmalonyl-CoA mutase. Alright, I'll see you in the next image, but until then, remember that Pixarize is here to help you through all of the intense studying and stress. No need to bludgeon your laptop with a croquet mallet. Later!